Happy Friday, everyone. I'm Bandish, founder of The Curious Mindset, a private community for technology leadership teams powered by 64 Tech, an IT solutions provider of hardware, cloud, and IT services. Although we're powered by 64 Tech, our core principle is simple: to always give more than we take. There are no membership fees, no catches, just a shared commitment to growth. And rest assured, this community prioritizes people over pitches. You won't be bombarded with any sales. Please do follow our dedicated LinkedIn page to stay updated on how 64 Tech can support you with any technology challenges. Or feel free to contact me directly if you are looking to shake things up with your current IT suppliers. While 64 Tech delivers technology solutions, we know that many of the toughest challenges tech leaders face aren't technical, they're human. There's pressure to appear all-knowing, which makes it difficult to admit what we don't know or ask questions that allow us all to be vulnerable. That's precisely why the Curious Mindset exists. For any new members joining us today, this is a space where we combine coaching, mentorship, and community to help technology leaders grow. We focus on three key areas: individual impact, helping you grow personally and professionally, especially if you don't have traditional support; team impact, strengthening your leadership to improve team performance and results; community, leadership can be isolating, so we're here to connect you with others walking the same path. This community grew out of my own experience and a desire to help others overcome the same struggles I faced as a new leader. I know how challenging that journey can be, and our North Star remains: no one leads alone. At 64 Tech, the mantra is "Together we grow," and the Curious Mindset is how we can bring that to life. Our mission: to help technology leaders become the best versions of themselves. Before we dive in, a quick favor. The Curious Mindset grows organically through invitation and reputation. And honestly, one of our biggest struggles is this: most technology leaders don't realize they need a community like this until they experience it. So if you believe in what we're building and want to support, here are 4 simple ways to help. Firstly, hit the bell icon on our LinkedIn page, select all to never miss a post. Secondly, leave a Google review. It takes under a minute but makes a huge difference. Thirdly, if our team reach out asking for a LinkedIn recommendation, we'd really appreciate it. And finally, invite other tech leaders by sharing our website. There's a short form to join, and Bryony will send you a quick email that you can forward on. In return, my commitment to you is this: I'll do everything I can, together with the team, to keep making this better fortnight after fortnight. We'll keep listening to your feedback and shaping this around what matters to you the most. Thank you. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speakers: our resident host, Andy McMenemy, our technology leader co-host, Steve Maxwell, and our returning special guest, Meri Williams.
Vanish, thank you so much, and thank you for your absolute commitment and continued support via 64 Tech to allow this community not only to come alive this year, but to thrive and to continue growing. You know, it couldn't be possible without your support, without your generosity and your benevolence. We really do appreciate it, because we know the results that are happening out there inside the community. And as you quite rightly said, it is a power of a community. Each of us together, working with each other, you know, to grow this opportunity for everyone to learn from some of the very best leaders that we've had as guests. And it's my absolute privilege today to invite one of them back again, a real living, life breathing tech leader. Meri, congratulations on being invited back, and welcome to the Curious Mindset. I'm delighted to meet you, and I'm so excited about the subject matter in our little brief chat. But I have one question for you, which is probably a little bit provocative. In the current climate, I'm fairly sure a lot of businesses will be looking at their structure. Do we really need middle managers, and especially in the tech world in today's day?
So I think we really do. I think that it's so enticing to imagine that, you know, engineers don't seem to like management very much. They don't seem to want a manager. Maybe they can just live without one. But I think that the role of an engineering manager, someone who can if you do the engineering manager role well, you're not just helping a team, you're helping a number of individuals to be the best that they can be. And so I think great middle managers are great multipliers. They help a number of people to be much better than they would be otherwise, whether that's improving their craft, whether it's understanding what they want from their career and then going after it, whether it's just being a better team member, whether it's learning some of the soft skills that are so hard. I think that they're really essential in any organization. And I think that we've actually seen a number of organizations take those roles away and then suffer for it. So I continue to be frustrated with the tech industry having this attitude of like, we'll start over again with 1920s factory style management and we'll iterate our way from there, when there's 100 years of research to learn from.
Yeah. I mean, it's a fascinating subject. I was enjoying our preamble when we were speaking earlier, and I believe you, from an engineering perspective, one of your very earliest claims to fame was in the engineering sector.
Yeah, so I started out as a bit of a hardware hacker as a kid, and I was very lucky. I got involved with what was called Sunsat, which was a project to build South Africa's first satellite. And I was in high school at the time, and the local university was building it. And so I have this unusual distinction that something I soldered when I was 16 went into space. It's all been downhill since then, but it's still quite a cool claim to fame to have. So yeah, I started off much more in the hardware side of things, then moved into software engineering, and then into AI actually a number of years ago. So, but I was in more the autonomous agent side of AI rather than the machine learning side. So, a little bit of a different flavor than what's du jour today.
So, Meri, tell us some more about your experience of growing, obviously, your management career. What have you learned? What are you going to share with us today?
Yeah, so I mean, like a lot of technology leaders, I got forced into management. It was the only route up, and I was very ambitious, and so I became a manager when I was in my very early 20s. And it was very anxiety inducing. My first two direct reports were older than my dad. They were very affectionately known as Statler and Waldorf, the two old men in the Muppets who sit up on the balcony and sort of yell at everybody. And that was the role they played in the organization. They had been there for 20 years. They knew exactly what we tried before. They knew why it had failed. And so almost every new thing we tried to do, they would be sort of sat up in the balcony going, well, this is going to fail again. And it was quite interesting. And I think what saved me in my early days as a manager was how technical I was. I remember these two gents having a problem, taking me into a meeting room and going, with their arms folded, leaned back, this is broken, and then the other one went, and this is broken. And I went, oh shit, and that means that's going to fail, and then this is going to break as soon as we scale it, right? And I remember the look of shock on their faces that I had understood what they had said and understood the implications of what they had said. And I can still remember them sort of looking at each other and then unfolding their arms and leaning forward, and then we solved it together. And so I think early on what saved me was how technical I was. But then I had also had a couple of bad managers at that point in my career, and I decided if I was going to be forced to be a manager, I would get good at it. And I'm a nerd, so I went looking for research and papers and things to read to teach me how to be better. And so I'm definitely a nerd because I have a favorite management book, which I probably talked about the last time I was on this, so I will not wax lyrical about it too much. But it's called First Break All the Rules, and it's a very data-driven book. It's off the back of a study that Gallup did, where they interviewed hundreds of companies, hundreds of thousands of managers and individual contributors, and they went looking for what made teams exceptional, what made teams productive and successful, not what made them happy. But the set of things that they found out reads like a list of what you need to do to make people happy. And that I really enjoy. And so I think that was my next big sort of realization, was that my job as a manager and as a leader was not to tell people what to do or to know what the right thing was, but it was to create the circumstances in which great work could happen. And so a lot of the learning from First Break All the Rules, it's got this sort of set of 12 questions that are predictive of high performance. And those 12 questions are, I know them off by heart at this point, but they're quite long and they're quite a lot to learn. And so there's a great book called Drive, which many of you will have read, which I think gives a really good framework to sort of step back a second and think about how we think about providing that environment for great work. And that in Drive, Dan Pink says you need purpose, autonomy, and mastery. So you need to understand the why, you need to have a say in the what, and you need to be proud of how. And when you look at those 12 questions from First Break All the Rules, it fits very well into that structure. There's a bunch of them that are about purpose, a bunch about autonomy, the majority about mastery, which I found very interesting because you don't think of mastery as being the most important thing for high performance. But actually, when I think about engineers and designers and product people and data people who've left jobs, feeling like they're not doing great quality work is actually a real common reason for people to move on. So I think that is really important. And then I think the missing part is inclusion. And I'd call it inclusion. Camille Fournier calls it community. You know, you can talk about it with different words, but it's essentially, can I be myself and be successful here? Or do I have to spend lots of energy pretending to be something I'm not? And so I think that kind of that recipe for success then is, you know, space to be awesome, space to make great decisions and do great work consists of having purpose, autonomy, mastery, and inclusion. And those four things together, I think, create this environment in which great work can happen. And I've found the more senior I've got, the more I'm working on the system that creates that environment rather than on the directly on the people or on the team or on the product even. A lot more of my work, the more senior I've got, particularly as I've gotten into CTO roles, has been on creating that environment in which great work can happen.
That's fascinating, Mary, because often it is the case, isn't it, where somebody who is very technically competent shines and then is promoted into a management or an area of responsibility where they're now not only just responsible for their technical competencies or mastery, but now it's people mastery. And that's a difficult skill to learn, right?
Yeah, and I think it's a job change. People think of it as a progression, and it is framed to a lot of people as a promotion. But in reality, it's a totally new set of skills that we're not in an industry or a field where, you know, the first step in getting a bit more senior is that you manage other people, and then you manage more other people, and then you manage a bigger org. Like, you go quite senior as an engineer, particularly as a software engineer, before you are even directing the work of other people, where, you know, something like marketing or sales, you get that responsibility much earlier in your life and in your career. And so I tend to talk with people who are senior engineers who want to become managers. I'm like, cool, we can make that happen, but it's a career change, and you're going to start over and be a novice in a number of ways. In order to succeed at this, you're going to have to go back to the drawing board and learn a whole bunch of new skills and be shit at something for a while, which is actually really uncomfortable for people who are already, you know, senior or staff engineers. They're very used to being very good at things. And then to be back at that stage again where you're, you know, on the one hand, you're learning every day, but on the other hand, you're bad at things every day. And that's not something you're used to anymore. The other thing that I think changes a lot when you move into management roles is, particularly compared to coding, is the dopamine hits are much fewer and farther in between. I think, you know, when you're coding every day, your tests pass, you feel a sense of accomplishment, you move on to coding the next feature. Your test pass, you feel a sense of accomplishment, you move on to coding the next feature, or you fix a bug, or you fix an incident, or whatever else. I think a lot of managers, especially new managers, struggle with the fact that it might be once a year when you get to promote someone, or when you get someone through a performance improvement plan successfully where they actually do improve and they get to stay at the company. Those sort of things are, you know, they're months in the making or years in the making sometimes, and that change in how rewarding it feels is very difficult for some people as well.
And I guess some businesses are better at implementing the sort of the transitional training to help somebody to grow into that role of management. And I guess some of them may not be, which then leads to that person feeling vulnerable, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I actually, for the last sort of 8-9 years, have run a workshop called Be a Brilliant People Developer. And it's essentially just what management science says we should do wrapped up for technical people. But the way people react to it, it's like it's, you know, manna from heaven or something, because the sort of typical corporate HR training you get on how to be a manager is very instructive. It tells you what to do. It's very directive, sorry, is the word.
Formulaic, isn't it?
Yeah, it tells you what to do, but it doesn't tell you why that works. It doesn't tell you the underlying research or the underlying science or psychology behind it. And actually, a lot of engineers, they want to understand the why. That's what they want, an understanding of the why that they can then build a set of practices upon. And so if you only provide them the practices, they are largely unconvinced and tend to be very skeptical of that form of training that comes without the underlying reasoning or rationale.
Yeah, the why is always more important, isn't it? Why we do it in a specific way, and then how we do it. Yeah,
absolutely.
So share with us some more. I'm really fascinated to understand more of this on your journey, particularly because as an engineer, that's much more different than sort of traditional management within a business, I'd imagine, where it's soft people management. You're from two angles, aren't you?
Yeah, so I became a people manager, had larger and larger teams over time, and then started managing other managers quite rapidly. One of the advantages I had in my early career is I stayed at Procter & Gamble for the first 10 years of my career. And on the one hand, that sounds like it could be quite boring and it's one place and it's this, huge blue chip company, but they were really, really good at leadership development. I think there's a stat that P&G produces more C-level execs for other companies than any company in the world except for GE.
Wow.
So GE and P&G between them produce this ridiculous number of C-level execs for other companies. And I think that there was a bit of a detour at one point where I became sort of a product manager for a while, where I owned a load of services and a load of financial products for the company. But some of staying in one place gave me this real advantage because I understood the setting, I understood how things worked. I now know I was diagnosed very late in life, but I'm autistic and ADHD, and so actually this combination of understanding the structure very well, but I did 7 roles in 10 years, I think. So having quite frequent change of actual role and setting tended to suit me very well. And so it ended up very positive for me that I'd stayed in one place and had all of these different opportunities. But yeah, I think I was 26 with $100 million budget and 300 people, which in retrospect was ridiculous. And I don't know how anybody gave me that much responsibility when I was that young. But it worked out, and I enjoyed it in the end. But I do think people asked me a lot of questions about, if I give advice to my younger self, I think I would have stayed an IC a lot longer had I had the opportunity. And I think I'm much better suited to being a staff engineer or a principal engineer than I am to being a manager, not least because of the autism. But I ended up having to kind of like learn the hard way how to do all of these people things. And I hadn't really realized how much I'd adapted until I did get my diagnosis. And I remember talking with the psychiatrist who was doing my evaluation. And he was like, "You do understand people very well, but you're getting to that understanding in a very, very different way than most other people. So I'm very analytical about it. I'm figuring out what somebody thinks or feels based on, the information available to me and my interpretation of their face and all of those kind of things." And he was just like, that other people don't have to do that." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Why have I got to do all this extra work? And so I remember that being a very interesting conversation. But yeah, I just ended up with larger and larger teams. And then when I left P&G, I was going to go to either Google or Amazon was where I was interviewing. And then a guy called Tom Loosemore rang me up and said, "Hey, we're going to fix government. Come help us do that." And then he called my friends and told them to convince me that I should come and join gov.uk, which was the government digital service at the time. And then I built the team that built gov.uk. So we did a 30 to 300 people scaling in 9 months, which I will never do again. I had 80 direct reports at one point in there. That was the ultimate stress test of my management skills, was doing 80 one-to-ones a month, 80, not 18. And coping with that and leading the team through a very intense period where basically somebody had promised the Prime Minister a date, and you don't get much more of a hard deadline than that. But it, you know, it went live successfully, and I think anybody who's used public services in the UK in the intervening sort of 10, 15 years, you've seen the impact of that early government digital service work. Like, we have better digital services than many countries because they brought this much more agile, much more customer focused, product driven way of working into central government.
Wow. I'm just mesmerized. I'm overwhelmed. But I mean, you must have definitely been demonstrating mastery at a high level to have been given that much responsibility and that much trust and faith in your abilities. So it's interesting for me. I mean, I imagine with your diversity, then knowing the why was more important, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so I read a lot. I looked into a lot of research. I just found I needed to understand the underlying reasons why in order to build good practices. And then, of course, you know, I read a lot about what people actually did, and you can't escape the kind of how to have a successful morning kind of content, can you? It's everywhere. I'm definitely not somebody who gets up at 5 a.m. and does yoga before anything else. Just for the record, you can be successful without doing that.
Me neither.
But yeah, I think I did ask a director when I was early on why she kept sending me into burning buildings, and she says, "You're the person I've got who you put out the fire, examine the damage, fix it, install a caretaker, and then you tell me you're bored. So that's why I keep sending you into burning buildings."
I
I'm
love
like,
it.
yeah, okay, it's my own fault. I understand now.
Excellent. But you know, with that kind of journey and that career progression, there is a kind of distinction between management and leadership, and those lines sometimes blur, Meri, don't they? And I guess you've done that journey. So help us to understand your perception then of where the shift is between management into leadership.
So I think there's a great anecdote in, I think it's probably in Seven Habits of Successful People or one of those books, about how, you know, the manager is the one, when you're hacking your way through a forest, the manager is the one who sets people up in shifts and makes sure that people are eating and that somebody's gathering food and water and that somebody's sharpening the tools and all those kind of things. But the leader's the one who climbs to the top of the tallest tree, looks around and goes, "Wrong fucking forest." And I think that's the ultimate difference between management and leadership, right? Is management is about looking after the people you've got and helping them achieve what they can and achieve their potential in an ideal world, and about things running efficiently and slickly. And then I think leadership is about the direction that you're taking. And I think in an ideal world, all managers should also be leaders. I don't think all leaders have to be managers. And I think one of the things that's been very positive in the last 20 years in the tech industry is we've realized we have people who are going to be great leaders but will not be great managers. So really great staff engineers, principal engineers, architects. There are people who need to learn the leadership skills. They have to be able to influence others. They have to be able to set direction. They have to be able to get people behind a particular strategy. They need to set strategy. They need to understand what needs to be achieved. They need to understand the business really well as well. So there's sort of commercial skills that need to be developed. Sometimes there's industry specific skills as well. So, you know, how deeply do you understand the domain that you're operating in? And we need to develop all of those skills in people without developing the people management side of things. And then I think that leaves room for there to be some people who are fantastic managers without needing to be as fantastic leaders. Like, I actually think that engineering manager, where you have, I don't know, 10 to 15 people who you help 10 to 15 people be brilliant, is such an amazing multiplier role. It's a great role to have. And it's also great when you move on to being a director or a VP or a CTO. But there's something wonderful about being in that situation where you've got like 1 to 2 teams, you're helping 1 to 2 teams worth of people be absolutely brilliant at what they do. I think that's actually a really fantastic role to have, and an important one. I think it's underestimated how much value those people can bring in an organization, and underestimated how essential they are to your ability to lead. So as a CTO, my chances of changing my organization are very, very low if my engineering managers don't believe in the change I'm trying to make, because they're the ones who talk to the engineers every day. They're the ones who are helping them believe that the career path is actually worth following and not just a bunch of tick boxes that they shouldn't care about, right? And so I think that there's a huge value in that middle layer of management and leadership, and in making sure that they are understanding and aligned to the overall purpose, that they get consulted properly so that that sense of autonomy is felt, and then that mastery is developed and that inclusion is developed so that a broad range of people feel like they can be themselves and be successful in that context.
I think that's a great point. And also, we also recognize that, as you quite rightly said, someone can be an exceptional manager and have loads of people following them and doing excellent work. They are actually a leader, but without the title. And often what I've observed, and I don't know if you've come across this, Mary, is that when they leave a business for a specific reason, a lot of the good people go with them, right?
Yeah,
Because people follow people.
Yeah.
And it's about that feeling that it's engendered between one person and another, that trust and that rapport and that respect, which is so powerful, isn't it? Which I guess unlocks this thing we all look after for, or we look for as managers, which is discretionary effort, where people go above and beyond, because they feel so respectful of us, right?
Yeah, and so committed to the cause, whatever the cause may be. I also think it's super interesting when you've got that situation where people follow someone. The company I'm at the moment, Pleo, where I've been for the last 2.5 years, they actually have a concept of followership. And when they're evaluating senior leaders, they evaluate them not only on leadership, but on followership. So whether people, you can be the one who can set direction, but if nobody's going to follow you when you go there, then that's not helpful. And we've had a couple of examples of that. We've got a couple of quite senior leaders in the organization where they can absolutely set the direction, but they can't get their people to follow behind them, and it makes them very ineffective. And I think that I'd never heard of it called followership before, so it was definitely a new term to me. But I think it makes a lot of sense to evaluate people that way as well.
And I think that's a great segue into a point, I think, which is really important that you're going to cover next, is around, when you've got an exceptional manager and you're delivering excellence and the team are delivering excellence, it's how do you take it to that next level of optimization then, What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually think that the book I mentioned earlier, Slack, what the sort of, it's a sort of ode to middle management in some ways, and the key point in it is that you have to have this this capacity in your organization for optimization. And I think in a sort of classic agile way of working, and to be clear, I mean little a agile. I'm not a safe proponent or any of those things. I just mean, the kind of work where you're learning and iterating as you go. And I think there's lots of different mechanisms and methodologies by which you can, learn and iterate as you go. But whether you're doing that by running a retro every 2 weeks and then choosing one thing to change, or whether you're, doing a larger program of learnings and adaptations, I think that's where that middle layer plays this huge role of being able to spot things that could be better and making them better, because there's nothing more frustrating for people on the ground than feeling like there's something bad that's obviously easy to fix that just isn't getting fixed. And so I actually think that middle layer is hugely important in achieving your strategy, in achieving your quality level, that level of mastery that we talked about earlier. But they're also really important in the individual contributors feeling a sense of autonomy, because they need to be able to be heard. They need to say, it's crap that we work like this, or we've got too many bugs, or that incident was really hard to deal with because there's too much technical debt, and we're running around like headless chickens when something goes wrong because the spaghetti code is so hard to interpret on the go. We need to fix this. And that's where I think there's a lot of opportunity for middle managers to both create space for their teams to get better, but also to feed that up into broader initiatives across the organization. And so finding a way to enable middle managers, but also to listen to them, I think is really important for any leader.
That's a great point. One of my questions was going to be, if there was in the community of the curious mindset, perhaps a middle manager that feels they would like more responsibility, that they have more in them yet to give. What are your thoughts on how they should elevate themselves in perhaps maybe a large organization or maybe even a smaller organization, Mary? How could they elevate themselves and, without sort of beating their chest and banging the drum, but just subtly make it evident that they are keen for responsibility and that they are capable?
Yeah, I think there's two ways. One is to find something that they really want to fix and then just go with a proposal. So go with a recommendation that says, hey, this is a problem, we should make it better. Here's my proposal for how to do it. Can I just get the bit of support I need? Whether that is, some places it's permission, some places it's money or time or people or slotted in all hands to do an announcement. It depends on what it is, what help they need. And so that's the world where you've got a specific thing in mind that you're already passionate about. I think the alternative is to just go, hey, I've got capacity, I'm ready for something more. But I think in order to put your hand up and say you've got capacity, your team has to be doing well. And I think where it goes wrong is where people are chasing that opportunity for their own career progression rather than because they have gotten their team to the point where they're almost not as needed. I think there are times where you would. I have definitely had people come with I would like more, I would like to do different things. And I look at their team and I'm like, yeah, sure, but could you fix the things that are on fire first, please? Like, put your fires out, and then when the smoke is cleared, we can talk about other things. But you've got to get your base, and I think that's true for everybody, right? You've got to have your base responsibilities well taken care of before you can go for more. It's definitely easier in smaller organizations to find the room, but I think in big organizations you tend to have more support and more structure and more opportunity to make bigger improvement because there tend to be a bit more in the way of funding and capacity and freedom to hopefully make those changes. So I think it can absolutely be done in both of those contexts.
When you, maybe perhaps in your experience and in your journey, Meri, where you have been delivering mastery and clearly have been recognized for it at that high level, and then for you to be promoted or to move on, how easy have you found it to bring some succession into your role so that there's somebody ready to step in, but perhaps not at the same level of mastery where you are?
Yeah, so I've actually had a pretty good record of success with that. When I left the government digital service, I actually left for health reasons. I had a disability diagnosis, so it was a bit unfortunate and a bit more rapid than planned. But I found out later I was backfilled by 5 people, which made me feel a lot better about how stressed I'd been during that role. The one of the people I'm most proud of having developed is Marta Jasinska, who was my VP of Eng when I was at Moo. She went on to be the CTO at Moo. She was the CTO at Bloom and Wild after that, and she's now VP of Eng at Bumble. And so she's had this meteoric career. But when I joined Moo, she was already there. She was a director of engineering, and I just really saw in her that she had so much potential, so much opportunity to develop, and she'd been overlooked because she was quite quiet. She for a quite ironic reason, which is that in Polish she has a lisp. It's not evident in English, but
Oh.
she was very self-conscious about speaking up because of this lisp that she had in her native language. And actually we having realized that actually it really mattered to the company that we heard what she had to say, we got her a speaking coach, and it made a massive difference. And it really unlocked and then meant that she just flew in terms of how she developed. So I was very lucky at Moo that she was ready and waiting to take things on. So I think they looked externally for about 5 minutes, and then they went, actually the right person's already in the room. When I left Monzo, the actual founding CTO took back over. So he had come to me when they were ready to scale and said, I'd been mentoring him for a couple of years, and said, hey, I think we're at the point where we need a you now. And so I went in there for a couple of years, and then did a lot of work with the regulator and making our incident management stronger and our platform stronger and that kind of stuff, and then handed back over at the point that I went to work on some COVID related stuff in 2020 when I went to Helix. And then at Helix, actually, I'd hired a couple of really good VPs who took over at the point that I sadly got sick with long COVID and was off for a little bit after that. So yeah, I've been relatively successful in developing people up, but I think that there's just a lot of people who are very keen for that opportunity, but also quite mystified about what it means to be at sea level.
Mhm.
I think a lot of the dealing with the board, dealing with other execs, treating the other execs as your first team in the way that Patrick Lencioni talks about, that's quite different or unusual, I suppose, compared to the default assumptions people have, where people think being CTO is about being the the architect of the company, and I think it's very often not about being the architect of the company at all. It's about being the one who can help technology make sense to the rest of the executive team, and to help understand the strategy, bridge between the business strategy and what's possible technically, and then make sure that tech is enabling that future rather than slowing it down.
Mm. And I guess that is the whole purpose of tech, isn't it? It's back to the subject we're talking about, is optimization. It's using what you have to the very highest level. Given the current climate, which is quite kind of interesting at the moment, how would you see opportunities for optimization? I mean, I know we've got a whole range of businesses represented here inside the community today, but give us some more insight, please, if you wouldn't mind, Meri, on optimization.
Yeah, so I think, some good examples I've seen recently within my own team are people realizing that they could use LLMs to write user stories, so converting requirements into work to be done by the team much faster. We've seen teams actually at a very broad level within Pleo. When I joined, there was a lot of tech debt, a spaghetti monolith, so very, very complex, complicated code that nobody wanted to touch because every time they did, something broke. And we've managed to de-risk that and get it to be a much easier to work within situation by taking an API first approach. So we made a major architectural change in saying we're going to build everything API first. We're going to talk between teams through APIs. We're not going to have anybody reaching into somebody else's database or any of that kind of stuff. And we did a big program of upskilling with a company called Skiller Whale, like killer whale, but with an S at the front because it's a pun. And that worked really well for us because they do quite small group sizes live coaching with live coding as well. And so that has worked really, really positively for us as an organization. And that level of optimization of making it so that teams don't have to be so interdependent on each other has made us go so much faster. So our cycle times come down by 40%. So we're 40% faster in terms of how we deliver features and improvements to the product, but we're also doing twice as much work as we used to do with the same size of team. And that sort of level of improvement in DORA metrics is something that I've not managed to do in previous roles. I think a lot of my previous roles were scaling roles though, so you're trying to just keep people productive while you're also adding a lot of people is a challenge all of its own. But this has actually been my first role in a long time where I've had sort of the same size of team and just needed to help get them achieve more and more and more. And so this kind of getting to the point where I think it's 235% higher throughput and 42% lower cycle time it has been a real achievement. And that took concerted effort, not just from me as the CTO setting that strategy, but from all of those middle managers to actually make it happen day to day in their teams, make sure their teams did the training and then that they implemented it in the day to day.
Well, I think not only is that management mastery, it's definitely leadership mastery. And on that subject, I'm just mindful of time and the amount of chat that's going on in the chats forum. So I'm going to hand over to one of our masters, and that's Steve, who's going to take us through some questions. Steve, over to you, my friend.